I use my Steam Deck every single week. I didn't suddenly get more disciplined. I didn't magically find more time. I didn't just wake up one day and decide I should just punch through a backlog. Something changed. I continued to finish more games. I started playing games without thinking about it, and I started enjoying games in a way that felt simple. Really, the only difference is the Steam Deck. Let's face it, I do this professionally, and I'm telling you for a fact, gaming isn't hard, but starting a game is harder than it should be. Let's think about this. You sit down at your desk, you open up your launcher, you scroll through your games, you pick one, it needs an update, you wait, you launch it, then something changed in your settings, your screen, your resolution, maybe it stutters, you start tweaking things, the lighting, the shadows are wrong, and you sit there going, did I actually even feel like playing this? And I think sometimes your session dies right there. And not because the game is bad, but the effort to start is too high. The problem isn't games, it's the friction around them. And I think those friction points add up to small things, tiny delays, extra steps. They don't feel like much individually, and as I described them, they aren't. But together, they kill your momentum. Facts are, I open up my Steam Deck every single week, no problem. Within 3 buttons, I'm into the game I want to play. Click on, and it's in the last game I played, and if that's the game I want to play, I just click go. That's it. Nothing more complicated. But I think what happens is we start saying things like, I just don't have the time anymore, but that's not really true. If you have time to scroll and time to, bring up YouTube, you probably have time to sit and do nothing. And facts are, I think it can sometimes feel like a bit of a commitment to open up a game, and you feel like you need to block time. You feel like a need to be ready. And I think that's a lie. Not that we don't have the time, but that gaming requires effort to begin with. Again, I think this is where the Steam Deck shows up, because it's not revolutionary. It's just there. You pick it up, you press the button, you're in. That's it. For me, that's great. There's no desk, no setup, there's no ritual. You just pick up and press go. It sounds small because it is, but I think it changes everything. Because now you don't have to plan to play, you just do it. If you follow my reviews channel at all, you'll notice that for a while now I've been saying, hey, I played this one majority on the Steam Deck, or I'll say things like this one played great on the Steam Deck. For me, it's a great addition to my tool set because I love to go, hey, this is great on my work tools, but the facts are my PC is above average specs. I have a seriously robust bit of hardware powering my experience, and I don't think that relates to a broad spectrum of people. If anything, I'm on the small end of the curve where the majority of users are not going to have that exact same experience. The Steam Deck is a great little catch-all because if it plays great on the Steam Deck, it probably plays pretty good on a lot of things. The facts are, the Steam Deck doesn't make games better, okay? But it removes a barrier between you and your experience to get to them. Let me show you what that looks like. You're on the couch, you've got 20 minutes, and normally that's not enough time to justify starting something. But now you just hit the power button and you're exactly where you left off. No loading back into menus, no what was I doing? You just continue. I think about with Hades, because it saves into each room you go into, it is so easy for me to have a play session of Hades where I will quite literally play a single room, something will happen, I will walk away, set my Steam Deck down and come back the next day to play that second room. Yes, it's probably killing my run, it's not the optimal way to play, but you know what? I have finished a lot of runs of Hades, one room at a time, across weeks and weeks now. I think that's the big shift from just starting a game to continuing a game. Because starting can be hard, but I think continuing is easy. There's momentum there, direction, you know what you were doing, so you keep rolling. And again, it just works. As I think that's a subtle thing the Steam Deck doesn't get enough credit for, is that you suspend a game and you resume a game, right? It's a killer feature. It's not really just a killer feature. It's kind of the whole experience for me, because now games exist in my Steam Deck the same way that your phone might, tablet, or some other smart device in your life. Always there, always ready, limited to no friction. You're not booting up a session to get started, you are returning to one. And I think that subtle change makes a change in your behavior without realizing it. I use my Steam Deck every single. Again, for me though, I'm publishing videos every single week, so I always need to be kind of on the go with something. But I think that same frictionless start is good for anyone, because let's talk about the backlog. I think most everyone in PC gaming has some amount of a backlog and they feel like it's a problem. I don't. It's not a burden to me. I don't mind it at all. But I think everyone has one and has a different relationship with it. And for some people, it's hundreds of games. There's the sales, the bundles, I'll get it later, but that later never comes. YouTube gives me lots and lots of analytics, and one of the ones it gives me that I love to see, the majority of my audience, if you're watching this video, more than 90% of you are in between 25 and 45, and you're probably male. What does that mean? Well, man, listen up. Every game can feel like a commitment, a new setup, a new investment, but for me on the Steam Deck, games don't feel like a commitment anymore. Options. You try something, you put it down, come back later, no pressure, no friction, and suddenly you're playing more games. You're finishing more games. Not because you're trying harder, because it's just easier to return. I think something subtle goes on as well. Something that I don't think people are always thinking about is that where you play changes how you play. On some level, when I sit down to my desk to start working on a video, gaming feels very intentional. I'm sitting down to game, and that comes with subtle expectations. When I pick up my Steam Deck, couch, on a bed, outside, in a random 15-minute window I have, it feels casual. It feels low pressure. And I think low pressure leads to more play. You don't need to justify things. You just pick it up. Because the facts are, the Steam Deck is not the most powerful way to play. It's not even close. But it doesn't matter because I think power was never the problem for a lot of people. Convenience was the biggest issue. You don't need the best version of the game. You need the most accessible version of it. I think the Steam Deck wins there every single time. Let's be clear here. This is not replacing your experience. This isn't for everyone. If you love your ultra settings, your maximum, your performance, the perfect visuals, you have your headphones you like just right, this is not going to hit the same. But if your setup is already under friction, if you're already having some obstacles to overcome, this might change a lot for you. Because I think the reality is that lost momentum, the time gaps, the friction, those things are where the Steam Deck thrives. The Steam Deck didn't change me, it just changed the system around me. And on some level, when the system changes, I think behavior follows. I didn't need more discipline. Sometimes I just needed fewer barriers. I still have the same amount of time, the same habits, the same distractions, the same responsibilities in my life. But now, sometimes on the Steam Deck, it just fits into my life. Games start faster, continue easier, and just feel lighter. And because of that, I play more, I finish more, and I enjoy it more. Because I tried harder, but because the Steam Deck finally removed some friction that I didn't know was there. Like I said at the start, I pick up my Steam Deck every single week, if not more than once a week. If you've ever felt like you want to play more games but don't, this might be something to consider. I know the Steam Deck isn't the only handheld on the market. It's my preference and the one that I have and use the most. The Nintendo Switch is a great bit of hardware if you like Nintendo games. You got to remember, Nintendo's kind of the king of making sure you buy games you already own on their Switch. There's quite a bit of friction between picking it up and getting into a game compared to the Steam Deck. But they do have some exclusive games you can't get anywhere else. I think if you're sharing a handheld device between family members, the Nintendo Switch is a great pick. Or if you're like dying to get into a specific Nintendo property. For me, I'm mostly a PC guy, which means I'm mostly a Steam guy, which means the Steam Deck just works because I don't need to buy a game again and I have it. This has changed one interesting thing for me in the Steam store is that now I am actively looking at games and going, do you have the green verified Steam Deck checkmark or not? That absolutely goes into my purchasing decision, where before I wasn't even concerned about that. I wasn't looking twice at that. But now it's definitely something where I go, hey, that's another in the positive reasons that I might purchase this game, because I like to have that option to pick it up on the Steam Deck. I don't think the Steam Deck is necessarily the most cutting edge hardware, but the Nintendo Switch always has kind of a below average bit of performance. Not because it's a bad device, but I think Nintendo historically goes with some older hardware, which lets them maybe have simpler supply chains and some cost on their end. But not to get too off track, I do think the top line Steam Deck always beats out the top 9 Nintendo Switch. Maybe in the future that hardware will change, but of course, if we're talking about handhelds, I do think it's worth mentioning that there's a number of aftermarket handhelds for PC gamers. You know, Republic of Gamers has their Ally brand, which is a line of gaming hardware that tries to put out more performance. And they've tried to link up with like, hey, Game Pass is on here too. But I've noticed that the biggest issue with those other third-party handhelds is they don't solve the problem I want solved, which is friction. Instead, they always have more setup, more troubleshooting. Yes, I got it. They have a higher performance ceiling on a lot of those devices. They're powerful, but they're kind of demanding. And they claim, hey, we've got access to everything. Look, the Epic Store, the Good Old Game Store, the Steam Store, your Game Pass. And it kind of feels closer to a full gaming PC and kind of keeps that same friction that I'm trying to avoid on my handheld device. Yes, more performance, but it brings problems. So on paper, just looking at 3 easy handhelds, I like the Steam Deck, it's what I use, but it kind of sits in the middle where you could argue that the Switch really removes friction by limiting choices, right? You're stuck with kind of these games and you better buy them if you want to use them. And yes, things like the Republic of Gamers handheld devices lineup, yes, they've got a lot of horsepower in that little bit of hardware, but for me it adds friction. I found the happy middle place being right in my Steam Deck. Because again, I still think that you don't play more games because your device is stronger. You play more games when it's easier to start.